Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The sorting ceremony is one of the most important events in the life of every first-year student at Hogwarts. It is in this moment that the sorting hat determines not just a house, it chooses the path a student will walk for the next 7 years, and sometimes for life. Some of the hat's decisions seem obvious. In Draco Malfoy's case, the verdict came almost instantly: Slytherin! But there were students over whom the hat deliberated for quite some time. Today I want to talk about those who, at first glance, seemed perfect for their house, yet could have easily ended up in another, and perhaps become entirely different people. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Neville Longbottom. At the time of sorting, Neville seemed like a timid, insecure boy, far from the image of a true hero. The hat's decision to send him to Gryffindor surprised even Neville himself. He almost asked to be placed in a different house. But over the years, Neville transformed from a clumsy student into a leader of the Resistance. In his 7th year, he led Dumbledore's army, stood against Death Eaters, and ultimately pulled the sword of Gryffindor from the sorting hat to destroy one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Still, the hat had seriously considered placing him in Hufflepuff. After all, Neville had always been hard-working and loyal. But as time would prove, the hat made the right call. Number 2. Hermione Granger. Hermione is one of the most brilliant witches of her time. She embodies intelligence, logic, and a love of learning, all qualities that make her a perfect candidate for Ravenclaw. Indeed, Hermione herself admitted that the hat seriously considered putting her there. However, she ended up in Gryffindor. At the end of the Philosopher's Stone, she said a line that explains everything: friendship and bravery are more important than books and cleverness. Hermione proved that courage isn't always innate. Sometimes it's shown in the willingness to sacrifice oneself for others. While Ravenclaw could have been proud of her, it was in Gryffindor that she truly came into her own. Number 3. Harry Potter. Harry is the face of Gryffindor: bravery, selflessness, and a readiness to stand against evil. All these traits define him. Yet few remember that the sorting hat took its time deciding where to place him. The hat saw in Harry the potential for Slytherin: ambition, leadership, and a strong will to achieve his goals. What's more, the fragment of Voldemort's soul inside him may have influenced the hat's perception. Fans believe that this piece of dark magic nudged the hat's thinking, but even without it, Harry as a Slytherin isn't such a far-fetched idea. Still, Harry asked not to be put there, and destiny took a different turn. Number 4. Minerva McGonagall. The future headmistress of Hogwarts, strict and fair, was a classic hat stall. The sorting hat took over 5 minutes to decide her fate, a rare occurrence signalling that a student could shine equally well in 2 houses. On the one hand, her intellect and magical talent were outstanding. On the other, her courage, resolve, and fierce sense of justice stood out. In the end, Gryffindor won. However, McGonagall later admitted that the idea of being in Ravenclaw didn't feel foreign to her. Perhaps had the choice been different, Hogwarts history would have taken another path. Number 5. Filius Flitwick. The charms master and head of Ravenclaw, cheerful and brilliant, was also a borderline case during his sorting. The hat debated between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. Despite his small stature and gentle demeanour, Flitwick fought against Voldemort twice with great bravery. Yet his magical expertise and scholarly nature made him a perfect fit for Ravenclaw. McGonagall and Flitwick often joked about how things might have gone if the sorting had turned out differently. Their stories are yet more proof that house placement isn't always black and white. Number 6. Gilderoy Lockhart. Of all the characters, Gilderoy Lockhart is perhaps the most controversial. Famous and charming on the surface, he was in truth vain and deceitful. His magical skills were questionable, and his heroic tales order stolen from others. And yet he ended up in Ravenclaw. How? The hat appreciated his cleverness and resourcefulness, even if those traits were used for dubious ends. Still, fans have often asked, why not Slytherin? Perhaps because Lockhart didn't seek power, only fame, or maybe the hat saw potential he never fulfilled. We can only guess. Number 7, Severus Snape. Severus Snape lived behind a wall of shadows, but his mind was sharp as any Ravenclaw's. In The Half-Blood Prince, Harry finds the handwritten notes in Snape's old textbook, improvements to standard potions, brilliant spells like Sectum Sempra scrawled in the margins. That wasn't just talent, that was obsession, precision, curiosity that never stopped asking, what else can this do? In another house, in another life, Snape might have thrived surrounded by thinkers instead of schemers. The Sorting Hat saw the hunger in him, the desire to prove himself, but maybe it also saw a lonely boy desperate for a place to belong, and Slytherin, full of pure-blood ambition and dark magic, welcomed him in ways Ravenclaw never would. Still, Snape's mind belonged in a library more than a dungeon. "You have your mother's eyes," Dumbledore once said. Lily Evans, a Gryffindor, might have been his anchor, but perhaps Ravenclaw could have been his refuge, a place where brilliance mattered more than blood. Number 8, Percy Weasley. Percy Weasley wanted to matter, not just in his family, where his brothers joked and his sister sparkled, but in the world. He wore his prefect badge like armor and clung to every ministry rule as if it were truth itself. "You don't understand what it's like," he once snapped at his father. "You're always putting your nose in where it's not wanted." That wasn't cowardice, it was ambition. Sharp-edged, Slytherin ambition. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone, he just wanted to rise. The Sorting Hat must have seen that hunger, the need to prove himself, to belong to something bigger. Slytherin could have nurtured that drive, shaped it, maybe even softened its edges with like-minded peers. In Gryffindor, Percy was a misfit among rebels, but if he'd been placed in Slytherin, he might have found allies instead of adversaries, people who didn't laugh when he quoted rules. He might still have joined the ministry, but perhaps with a truer sense of who he was, not who he was trying to impress. Number 9, Remus Lupin. Remus Lupin was never the loudest marauder. He didn't prank for attention like Sirius or lead the charge like James, but he was always there, steady, watching, ready to act when it mattered most. "You're the only one who ever left out chocolate," Harry once told him after a Dementor attack. That small act, offering kindness when others offered fear, was pure Lupin. It wasn't bold, it wasn't flashy, but it saved Harry more than once. He never resented his condition. He worked through it, studied while others slept, stayed calm when others panicked. Hufflepuff would have welcomed a soul like his, patient, thoughtful, fiercely loyal. He never sought recognition, he only wanted to be useful. In The Half-Blood Prince, Tonks told him, "You see, she still wants you," but Lupin pushed her away, not out of pride, but guilt. He never wanted to be a burden. That's not cowardice, that's compassion. The Sorting Hat might have wavered, Hufflepuff would have protected him. But Gryffindor asked more. Gryffindor demanded that he show himself to a world that feared what he was, and Remus accepted. He stood at the front of a classroom, fought in 2 wizarding wars, and died defending the future. That kind of bravery doesn't roar, it just endures. Number 10, Sirius Black. Sirius Black was born into the House of Black, a family where pure blood supremacy was tradition, and the green and silver of Slytherin was worn like armor. His cousin Bellatrix, a fanatic, his brother Regulus, a Death Eater. The Sorting Hat must have felt it all in him too, cleverness, cunning, pride, and ambition. "You'd do well in Slytherin," it might have said. And, truthfully, Sirius shared more than just a name with that house. He had a sharp tongue, a reckless charm, and a temper that could cut steel. But Sirius chose rebellion. When the Hat tried to nudge him towards Slytherin, he turned away. "I hated the lot of them," he told Harry years later. My parents with their pure-blood mania. So the hat placed him in Gryffindor, where he could stand against the darkness he was born into. Yet he never fully left that darkness behind. In the Order of the Phoenix, he called creature vermin. He laughed at danger like it was a game. His hatred for Snape burned as fiercely as any feud in the dungeons. If he had gone to Slytherin, would he have become Regulus, or outshone him? Perhaps he'd have changed the house from within, leading a new kind of Slytherin, or perhaps the ambition of that house would have swallowed him whole. We'll never know. But one thing is certain. Sirius Black carried Slytherin's fire and Gryffindor's fury, and they burned in him side by side. Number 11. Luna Lovegood. Luna Lovegood walked through Hogwarts as if the world around her was made of clouds and riddles. She saw Nargles where others saw air, and believed in things no one else even dared to whisper. It made her an outcast, but Luna never cared. That kind of quiet defiance wasn't just eccentric, it was brave. When others mocked her, she smiled. When her shoes were stolen, she calmly said, "It's all right. It's the kind of thing I expected." She didn't fight back with fists, but with unshakable calm. In the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry was shunned and called a liar, Luna stood beside him. "I believe he who must not be named is back, and I believe you fought him," she said, without blinking. She didn't ask for proof. She didn't need it. That moment wasn't about Ravenclaw logic. It was pure Gryffindor courage. Standing for the truth when the world is against you, that's not intellect, that's heart. She went with Harry to the Department of Mysteries, fought Death Eaters, never hesitated. When Dumbledore's army needed her, Luna didn't falter. In the Deathly Hallows, she was one of the last defenders of Hogwarts, dueling in the final battle as fiercely as any lion-hearted witch. She didn't roar, but she never backed down. In another life, the Sorting Hat could have seen all of this and whispered, "Gryffindor." But Ravenclaw gave Luna space to be herself, to drift and dream, to think in ways no one else could. Still, there's no question, her bravery was not a flicker. It burned quiet and strong. Luna in red and gold would have made the lion proud, just as she made the eagle proud in her own peculiar way. Number 12, Ron Weasley. Ron Weasley wasn't the loudest voice in the room. He wasn't the smartest nor the bravest, not in the way Harry or Hermione were, but when it came to loyalty, to standing beside the people he loved, Ron never wavered. He left home at 11 with hand-me-down robes and a heart wide open. "I'm the 6th in our family to go to Hogwarts," he told Harry on the train. "You could say I've got a lot to live up to." Behind the jokes, there was pressure, a constant fear of not being enough. The Sorting Hat saw his courage, but it also saw his heart. In Hufflepuff, Ron's quiet strengths might have flourished in the light. He valued friendship above glory. He was the one who stayed with Harry through the darkest nights. He was the one who told Hermione, "You're brilliant, but scary." He didn't need the spotlight. He needed purpose. And Hufflepuff, with its love of loyalty, fairness, and hard work, might have nurtured the parts of Ron that often felt overlooked in Gryffindor. Remember the chessboard in Philosopher's Stone? Ron didn't hesitate. "You're the one who has to go on, Harry," he said. "Not me, not Hermione, you." He sacrificed himself, willingly. Not for heroism, for friendship. That's not just Gryffindor bravery, that's Hufflepuff devotion, the kind that doesn't ask for recognition, the kind that just is. The Hat might have whispered, might have considered. But Ron, perhaps without knowing, wanted to belong to the same house as his brothers, the same table, the same common room, the same expectations. But in another world, with other words, Hufflepuff, Ron could have been a different kind of hero. Not the shadow of Harry Potter, but the heart of a house, built on quiet strength. Number 13. Tom Riddle, Voldemort. The Sorting Hat paused longer than usual when young Tom Riddle placed it on his head. It wasn't just because he came from a Muggle orphanage or that he already knew more about magic than most 11-year-olds. It was because the hat saw something deeply conflicted. "You could be great, you know," it told him, echoing the same words it would later say to Harry. "It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness." But what if it had chosen differently? Tom Riddle was not just ambitious, he was brilliant. By the age of 11 he had already mastered basic control over objects without a wand. At Hogwarts he quickly became the most gifted student of his year. Professor Slughorn once said he was one of the most brilliant students Hogwarts has ever seen. He didn't just want power, he wanted understanding. He roamed the library alone, obsessed with secrets. Imagine him in Ravenclaw Tower, surrounded by minds as hungry as his. The diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw, which he eventually turned into a Horcrux, was not just a trophy. It was a symbol of the house that might have truly nurtured his intellect. If Riddle had been placed in Ravenclaw, would the thirst for domination have given way to a thirst for truth? Perhaps instead of creating Horcruxes, he would have explored the depths of magical theory and discovered how to heal rather than destroy. In a different timeline, he might have become the next Albus Dumbledore, not his greatest rival. After all, both wizards were orphaned prodigies, both tempted by dark ideas, and both stood at a crossroads. One chose wisdom, the other chose control. Even as a Slytherin, there were moments that hinted at what he might have been. He spoke to Dumbledore with curiosity, asking, "I can speak to snakes, they find me. I can make them do things, what am I?" He didn't ask how to use that gift for power, he simply wanted to understand it. That moment, simple, human, was lost in the path the hat allowed him to follow. Number 14, Cho Chang. Of all the students to walk the winding corridors of Hogwarts, Cho Chang is one whose path feels both familiar and misaligned. Introduced as a Ravenclaw, she embodies intelligence, grace, and a quiet demeanor, often mistaken for aloofness. Yet beneath her careful exterior lies something deeper, a softness, a loyalty, a deep emotional current that does not echo the cool detachment of Rowena. Ravenclaw's ideal student, but rather the warm and steady heartbeat of Helga Hufflepuff's house. The Sorting Hat, known for its perceptive judgment, must have hesitated. There was more to Cho than cleverness, there was heart, and where there is heart, there is always a crossroads. The Cho Chang we met in Harry Potter, and the Goblet of Fire was a girl with wings. She was seeker for the Ravenclaw Quidditch team, quick and agile in the air, admired for her athleticism, and admired even more for her beauty. But her beauty was never her defining trait. Cho was popular, yes, but not dominating. She smiled at others and she wept when she lost. She carried herself with quiet dignity, not intellectual arrogance. If Hermione Granger represented the sharp edge of Ravenclaw intellect, Cho was its gentler counterpart, but even that distinction began to feel untrue when one looked more closely. Cho's defining story is not that of a great intellect at odds with magical theory, but rather a young girl pulled apart by loss and grief. When Cedric Digory died, her mourning was raw and unfiltered. In Order of the Phoenix, we saw Cho not as a symbol of logic or reasoning, but as someone entirely led by emotion. She started crying in the middle of a date, Harry would later complain, frustrated and confused by her feelings. But Cho was not weak, she was simply real, and in her grief, she showed the depth of her character. Helga Hufflepuff once took in students who didn't fit the ambitions of Gryffindor, the cunning of Slytherin, or the minds of Ravenclaw. She prized loyalty, fairness, and kindness. What better description for Cho, who risked her reputation to support Harry when many others believed him a liar? Cho didn't turn away. She joined Dumbledore's army. She wanted to fight. She didn't calculate the odds or step back to analyze. She stepped forward. And yet, the sorting hat placed her in Ravenclaw. Perhaps it saw a spark of academic ability, a mind that approached magic with discipline. She was certainly capable, but capability is not destiny. Hufflepuff would have offered Cho a kind of safety net, a place where heart mattered more than mind, and where grief would be seen not as a distraction, but as a part of the human experience. Her friendship with Marietta Edgecombe is another window into Cho's values. Marietta betrayed Dumbledore's army, but Cho defended her. She didn't excuse the betrayal, but she understood the fear behind it. "She's in trouble at home," Cho said. "Her mother works at the ministry." Cho was not blind to the consequences, but she held on to her friendship, even when it became inconvenient. It cost her Harry's trust. It cost her the group. But Cho's loyalty stood its ground. That's not Ravenclaw behavior. That's Hufflepuff. There is something healing about Cho, even when she is hurting. Her presence in Order of the Phoenix is like a mirror of Hogwarts itself during the darkest times, wounded, unsure, emotionally exhausted. She clung to memories of Cedric, not because she couldn't let go, but because she didn't want him to be forgotten. The way she spoke about him, the way she cried in Madame Puddifoot's tea shop, showed a tenderness that didn't align with Ravenclaw's aloof reputation. "He was a great wizard," she said simply, and the tears followed. Those tears weren't weakness, they were strength, made visible. In the room of requirement, during Dumbledore's army meetings, Cho was not the star pupil. She didn't outshine others with brilliant charm work or dueling prowess, but she was there, she practiced, she learned, she supported others. When Neville struggled with defensive spells, Cho didn't mock him, she encouraged him. It is in those moments, the quiet, uncelebrated ones, that her Hufflepuff spirit shone brightest. Even her romantic storyline, often criticized for its emotional turmoil, is a reflection of her heart. She fell in love, she lost, and she tried to heal by finding connection again. Her kiss with Harry wasn't a strategy or a moment of desire, it was a cry, a gesture of desperation and hope tangled together. Harry didn't understand, but that doesn't invalidate Cho's feelings. Hufflepuff values emotional honesty, and Cho had it in spades. She wasn't trying to impress or seduce. She was trying to be seen, to be held, to not feel alone anymore. In contrast, many Ravenclaws are depicted as solitary or even arrogant. Luna Lovegood, another Ravenclaw, is an exception, but her strangeness isolates her. Cho, on the other hand, wanted community. She thrived when surrounded by others. Her decision to join Dumbledore's army wasn't born of academic curiosity, it was born of justice. She knew what was right. She didn't sit in the library to analyze spells. She wanted to protect her friends. Her activism wasn't theoretical, it was personal. Had she been sorted into Hufflepuff, perhaps her path would have been gentler. Surrounded by students like Hannah Abbott or Susan Bones, Cho might have found more comfort in her grief. The Hufflepuff common room, nestled near the kitchens, with its warm colours and cosy nooks, would have been a sanctuary. In Ravenclaw Tower, with its riddles and sharp-edged excellence, Cho was often left alone with her sorrow. There is no shame in solitude, but comfort sometimes needs company. Cedric Digory, a Hufflepuff, shared many of Cho's traits. Brave, yes, but also fair, kind and beloved by many. It's no coincidence they were drawn to each other. Cedric and Cho shared a moral compass, one that didn't demand attention, but offered support. Cedric's death devastated her because he represented the best of the world she wanted to believe in. Losing him meant losing a part of her idealism. And still, she tried to hold on to hope. That's Hufflepuff resilience. Number 15. Ginny Weasley. Ginny Weasley, the youngest of 7 siblings and the only daughter of the legendary Weasley clan, was sorted into Gryffindor without surprise or debate. The fiery-haired girl from the Burrow, raised on bedtime stories of bravery and mischief, seemed destined to don the scarlet and gold. With 6 older brothers all sorted into Gryffindor before her, the sorting hat's decision appeared predictable. Yet in the shadows of that sorting ceremony, hidden beneath the noise of legacy and tradition, lingered another possibility, one that could have changed the course of Hogwarts history. Slytherin. From the very beginning, Ginny showed signs of a mind far sharper than most gave her credit for. When she arrived at Hogwarts, she was shy and quiet, traits not uncommon for a first year, especially one overshadowed by 6 accomplished brothers. But within that silence, she harboured secrets. The diary of Tom Riddle, gifted to her without her knowledge of its true nature, became the vessel of her thoughts, fears, and dreams. Ginny poured her heart into those pages, not out of recklessness, but from a yearning to be seen, understood, and validated. That vulnerability, masked by her composed demeanour, revealed a girl capable of deeply strategic thinking, a trait prized by Salazar Slytherin himself. Her ability to compartmentalize emotion was uncanny. Even as the diary consumed her, Ginny went unnoticed for months. She was controlled, calculating in her concealment, careful never to arouse suspicion. The chamber of secrets was opened, students were petrified, and not once did she allow her agony to rise to the surface until it became unbearable. That control over her outward emotions, the silent endurance of internal struggle, marked her as someone more complex than the stereotype of a hot-headed Gryffindor. During her 4th year, when the Triwizard Tournament consumed the school's attention, Ginny moved with quiet confidence. While many students fawned over Victor Crumb or cowered at the appearance of dragons, Ginny had already begun to carve her own place in the social order of Hogwarts. She was dating, laughing, and slowly letting go of her schoolgirl crush on Harry. Not out of spite, but from a place of self-worth. She was learning how to play her cards well, observing, adapting, and waiting for the right moment. In the words of Sirius Black, the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. Ginny understood that more than most. She read people with startling precision. This skill became even more apparent during her time with Dumbledore's army. While Harry taught spells and Neville found his courage, Ginny became a strategist. She mastered the Bat-Bogey Hex to such a degree that even Professor Slughorn later admitted it was one of the most vicious pieces of magic he'd ever seen performed by a student. It wasn't just raw talent, it was control, focus, and the desire to dominate in situations that mattered. Ginny never wasted energy on empty gestures. She bided her time and struck only when it served a purpose. When Dolores Umbridge seized control of Hogwarts, it was Ginny who suggested the Room of Requirement as a hidden base for Dumbledore's army. She didn't stumble upon it by accident. She had paid attention to school legends, picked up on whispers, and deduced its function. That moment alone was more Slytherin than most of Draco Malfoy's 4th-year antics. She used knowledge as a weapon and secrecy as a shield. She didn't flaunt her intelligence. She wielded it. In the books, her interactions with others often show a surprising level of emotional intelligence and manipulation, not in a negative sense, but in a way that shows she knows how to get results. When Ron disapproved of her dating Michael Corner, Ginny didn't argue. She changed the subject, let Ron think he'd won, then quietly continued doing what she wanted. Later, when Michael sulked after Gryffindor's Quidditch victory, Ginny dumped him with cold efficiency and moved on to Dean Thomas. Her emotional independence, the way she navigated the teenage landscape of Hogwarts, was impressively Slytherin in nature. She never lost herself in any relationship, and that, perhaps, was her greatest strength. Harry, in his own limited perception, often underestimated her. In Order of the Phoenix, he's shocked by her bluntness and strength. When he laments that no one can understand being possessed by Voldemort, she responds curtly, "Well, lucky you." It is a sharp moment, one where she reveals both her trauma and her strength in facing it. She doesn't crave pity, she demands respect. She's been to the darkest corners of her mind and emerged more guarded, more calculating, and more dangerous. The 7th year, though, is where the what-if becomes most tantalizing. With Harry, Ron and Hermione gone, Hogwarts fell under the control of the Carrows, Death Eaters who thrived on punishment and fear. Many students hid, but not Ginny. She, alongside Neville Longbottom and Luna Lovegood, organised the resistance. But what if she'd been in Slytherin? Imagine the possibilities. A Ginny fluent in Slytherin's secret corridors, its inner politics, its whispered alliances, she would have been perfectly positioned to be a double agent within the very house of Voldemort's loyalists. In Slytherin, she wouldn't have been the outsider leading a rebellion. She would have been the shadowy figure beneath the green and silver banner, organising covert strikes, feeding false information to the Carrows, sabotaging their authority from within. Her charm, her sarcasm, her ability to appear non-threatening, all tools she could have used to manipulate perceptions. And no one would have suspected the sweet-faced Weasley girl in the enemy house. It is not difficult to imagine her weaving alliances, trading secrets, and orchestrating sabotage while wearing a Slytherin badge. Number 16, Dolores Umbridge. Of all the villains in the Harry Potter universe, few evoke the same visceral reaction as Dolores Jane Umbridge. Her soft pink cardigans and girlish giggles conceal a venom more corrosive than many dark wizards ever dared to wield. Yet behind this carefully constructed facade lies a deeply layered character, a woman who, under different circumstances, might have walked a kinder path. When the sorting hat rested on young Dolores's head during her first moments at Hogwarts, it hesitated, for it sensed in her a quality often overlooked, a shadow of Hufflepuff. Dolores was born into a home divided by bitterness and secrecy. Her father, Orford Umbridge, was a wizard of humble stature working in the Ministry's Department of Magical Maintenance. Her mother, a Muggle, left the family when Dolores was young, taking her squib brother with her. The shame of this fracture, especially in a world where blood purity could dictate one's social ascent, left a scar. Dolores buried this humiliation under layers of ambition and regulation. But before that armor calcified, there were glimpses of another possibility, of a girl who might have found solace in the patient, hard-working community of Hufflepuff. The sorting hat saw the seed of diligence in her. She was not a child who shunned effort. From an early age, she exhibited relentless focus on order. Her bedroom was always immaculate. Her schoolbooks were not just well kept, they were categorized by subject, annotated in tiny letters and cross-referenced by color. This was not done for show, but because she believed in structure. It made her feel safe, especially in a household where emotions ran volatile. These were not the traits of a power-hungry schemer. Not yet. They were the habits of a girl seeking peace through predictability. At Hogwarts, though, that yearning collided with ambition. The hat hesitated between Hufflepuff and Slytherin for nearly a full minute. As it later confided to Dumbledore in one of their private conversations, there had been a flicker of Hufflepuff in Dolores's heart. But the decisive factor was her desire not just to belong, but to dominate the environment she entered. The hat placed her in Slytherin, and in that house she was shaped by shadows and survival. Still, the remnants of her alternate path clung to her, distorted but not entirely erased. She rose swiftly through the Ministry of Magic, not only because she craved power, but because she believed in the dignity of systems. She created rules and enforced them not out of sadism, at least not initially, but because she believed the rules made people better. In another life, this might have been a Hufflepuff's devotion to fairness. She genuinely thought she was promoting order and morality. But the path she took darkened these instincts into something cruel. One might consider her obsession with discipline as evidence of her innate Slytherin qualities, and indeed there is merit to that. But let us not forget that Helga Hufflepuff's house also values rules, rules that protect the weak, provide fairness, and offer structure in a chaotic world. Dolores, in her twisted way, believed herself a protector. During her time as Senior Undersecretary to the Minister for Magic, she saw herself as a shield between wizarding society and chaos. She pushed forward decrees, such as Educational Decree No. 24, forbidding student gatherings without approval, not merely to silence dissent but to prevent what she saw as insurrection. Her time at Hogwarts as High Inquisitor was her most visible dissent. She forced students to use quills that etched their own skin, banned professors with non-pureblood heritage, and rewrote school curricula to suit her view of appropriate magic. Yet if one looks closer, even these horrors were rooted in a distorted version of Hufflepuffian justice. She believed in giving people what she thought they deserved. "You have been told that a certain dark wizard has returned from the dead," she once said in the Great Hall. "This is a lie." In her mind, she wasn't denying truth. She was preserving order. But her need to impose order lacked compassion, and this is where her divergence from Hufflepuff becomes most apparent. While a true Hufflepuff sees people as ends in themselves, Dolores saw them as variables in an equation of control. If they disrupted the pattern, they had to be corrected. Still, somewhere deep within her was that young girl who once believed that rules could heal pain. That girl had wanted to be liked, to be seen as competent, to be accepted. Her pink bows and kitten plates were not merely ornaments. They were psychological armor, attempts to seem harmless, motherly, even lovable. Professor Sprout once remarked in passing to Dumbledore that she remembered a girl who lingered outside the Hufflepuff common room during Dolores's first year, as if trying to peek into the life she might have had. She had come alone, stood still for a while, and left. Nothing more. Yet the image lingered. Did Dolores ever wish the hat had chosen differently? Likely, not consciously. But such moments point to inner fractures. That brief hesitation at the threshold of the Hufflepuff basement was perhaps the last time she allowed herself to wonder if kindness might suit her. It is also telling that Dolores never married, never formed lasting friendships, and never appeared to show genuine affection for anyone. True Hufflepuffs value community, warmth, and shared labor. Dolores valued obedience, and yet she immersed herself in social institutions that echoed the collective nature of Hufflepuff, the ministry, the Hogwarts staff, even the inquisitorial squad. But in each she assumed the role of judge, not peer. That need for control, shaped by years of resentment, curdled what might have been a different path. Number 17. Lily Potter. Of all the characters who passed through the hallowed halls of Hogwarts, Lily Evans Potter remains one of the most quietly remarkable. Her legacy was built not only on the love that saved her son, but also on the choices she made long before she faced Voldemort. The Sorting Hat placed her in Gryffindor, a decision that defined her future and ultimately shaped the fate of the wizarding world. But when she sat down on the stool that first evening in the Great Hall, the hat hesitated. Lily Evans was not just brave, she was brilliant. And brilliance has always been the domain of Ravenclaw. Even as a young girl, Lily stood apart. Raised in the Muggle world, she encountered magic as something wondrous and mysterious. But unlike some Muggle-borns who struggled to adapt, Lily didn't flinch or falter. Instead, she absorbed everything around her like parchment soaking up ink. Her earliest interactions at Hogwarts were marked by awe, but not confusion. She asked questions other students never thought to ask about spell structure, wand movement, magical theory. In charms, she excelled from the start. Professor Flitwick, who would later remember her as one of his most gifted students, awarded her full marks in nearly every class. What marked Lily as different even then was not only her aptitude, but the intensity with which she pursued knowledge. She was not content with simply casting a spell. She wanted to understand why it worked. When the other students learned Alohomora, Lily researched ancient unlocking enchantments in the restricted section. She annotated her own textbooks, scribbled notes in the margins, and quietly corrected even the most arcane errors. The Sorting Hat likely weighed all of this: intelligence, curiosity, a mind that sparkled with clarity. It saw in her the qualities that had once belonged to Rowena Ravenclaw herself. Ravenclaw House would have welcomed her. Among students who prized intellect and wit, Lily might have found kindred spirits, those who stayed up past curfew, not to duel in corridors, but to debate magical ethics, metaphysics, and the evolution of spellcasting. One can imagine her at a Ravenclaw table, curled over a book of ancient runes, her red hair glowing in the candlelight, surrounded by stacks of parchment. She would not have been out of place there. In fact, she may have thrived more fully, far from the noise and drama that sometimes characterized Gryffindor Tower. But the Sorting Hat saw something else, something that Ravenclaw alone could not fully contain. Lily's independence was not merely academic, it was moral. She questioned what others accepted, refused to go along with cruelty, and spoke out even when silence would have been safer. In her first year, she defended Severus Snape from bullies, ignoring the glares of her housemates. It wasn't popular, it wasn't strategic, but it was right. The Hat saw this too, the steel inside her kindness, the courage beneath her clarity. That brand of moral fortitude isn't simply intelligence, it is the mark of a Gryffindor. Still, the possibility of Ravenclaw lingers. There were moments when Lily's path bent in that direction. Her OWL results were among the highest in her year. She spent hours in the library not because she had to, but because she loved the quiet immersion of study. Even her spellwork had a certain elegance. She once modified a shield charm to protect against multiple spells at once, a feat that left even Professor McGonagall impressed. When James Potter and Sirius Black laughed about pulling pranks, Lily stayed back to observe the magical mechanisms they used, learning from them even when she disapproved. Always learning, always thinking. What makes Lily's near placement in Ravenclaw so compelling is the contrast it would have created in her life. Had she been sorted differently, she may never have grown close to James Potter. She might have spent her evenings debating theoretical magic with Pandora Lovegood, or poring over magical herbology journals with Professor Sprout. Perhaps she would have joined the dueling club for technique rather than bravado. She may have become an unspeakable, lost to the Department of Mysteries rather than the battlefield of Godric's Hollow. The Sorting Hat once admitted that sometimes I sought too soon. In Lily's case, it hesitated for good reason. Her courage was unmistakable, but it was the quiet, unshowy courage of someone who acts on principle, not glory. In many ways, that courage resembled the quiet discipline of Ravenclaw as much as the roaring valor of Gryffindor. After all, bravery is not always loud. Sometimes it sits in silence, turning pages, challenging the world with thought rather than sword. One can imagine how different her interactions with Snape might have been in Ravenclaw. Removed from the social pressures of Gryffindor, free from James's orbit, she might have maintained their friendship longer, perhaps even saved him from the darkness that eventually consumed him. Snape, a Slytherin surrounded by suspicion, might have found in Lily a bridge to something better. Their shared love of magic, especially potion-making, could have been a powerful bond in the common room of Ravenclaw, where merit spoke louder than blood. But even within Gryffindor, Lily never lost her Ravenclaw spirit. She corrected her classmates gently but firmly when they misunderstood a charm. She wrote to Professor Slughorn over the summer with questions about experimental potions. Her analytical nature never waned. When she joined the Order of the Phoenix, it wasn't simply out of courage, it was because she believed in the intellectual and moral rightness of fighting against tyranny. She saw the war not just as a battle of wands, but as a battle of ideas, of values, of truth. In The Prince's Tale, we see a memory where Lily calls James an arrogant toe-rag. She is unimpressed by showmanship, contemptuous of bullying, and holds firm to her ethical compass. That moment captures the duality of her character. She does not admire power for power's sake. She admires integrity, self-awareness, and kindness. These are traits not bound by house colours, but they are deeply honoured in Ravenclaw's legacy of wisdom and reason. Even her love for James, once it finally blossomed, was not blind. She did not fall for his tricks and swagger. She loved him only when he grew up, when he learned humility, when he began to use his intelligence for something beyond mischief. Her choice of partner, like everything else she did, was deliberate. It was not romance born of drama but of respect. That too speaks to a Ravenclaw sensibility, one that values substance over spectacle. The power of her sacrifice, the ancient protective magic that destroyed Voldemort's body and shielded Harry, did not stem from cleverness, though Lily had that in abundance. It came from love, a love so absolute that it transcended even the darkest curse, and yet it would be a mistake to think of her sacrifice as irrational or impulsive. Lily made that choice with her eyes open. She understood the consequences. She had the mind to grasp the complexity of what was happening. Her love was brave, yes, but it was also informed, intelligent. It was Ravenclaw's wisdom in Gryffindor's heart. Professor Dumbledore himself, a former Gryffindor with the soul of a Ravenclaw, understood this blend better than anyone. He once told Harry, "You are protected, in short, by your mother's love." He knew that kind of love didn't just happen. It was a choice, like the choice Lily made when she stood between her baby and a wand. A calculated, final decision made in a moment of terrifying clarity. The question remains, had the Sorting Hat chosen differently, would Lily's end have changed? Would a life in Ravenclaw have protected her from the tide of war? Possibly, but would she have been the same Lily? The girl who stood against cruelty in her first year, who challenged her friends to be better, who believed in what was right, even when it was hard. The Sorting Hat saw that the truest part of her was not just her intellect, but her integrity. And sometimes integrity requires fire more than logic. Still, the ghost of Ravenclaw lingers in her memory. It whispers from her letters, from her notes in textbooks, from the thoughtful silences in which she considered every spell before casting it. It lives in Harry too, in his sharp instincts, his questions, his occasional doubt, in his ability to learn not just from books but from people, and to grow in response to knowledge and truth. Ravenclaw left its fingerprints on Lily's legacy, even if it never claimed her as its own. And perhaps that is the true magic of the Sorting Hat's dilemma. That Lily Evans Potter could belong to two worlds at once. That she reminded us that intelligence is not divorced from bravery, and that the mind and heart can work in tandem to shape a destiny. She was a Gryffindor by choice, yes, but she was Ravenclaw by nature. A rare alchemy, a fusion of brilliance and boldness that no house could fully contain. Lily's story, in the end, is not about what house she belonged to. It is about how she lived. With a mind sharp as crystal and a heart brave as fire, she walked the thin line between wisdom and valor. The Sorting Hat made its choice, but Lily made hers too every day, in every word, every spell, every act of love. Number 18, Peter Pettigrew. Of all the questionable decisions made by the Sorting Hat, the placement of Peter Pettigrew in Gryffindor remains one of the most debated. The red and gold colours of courage and nobility never truly suited him. Among James Potter, Sirius Black and Remus Lupin, Peter stood as an echo, a reflection not of their bravery, but of their power. From the moment he entered Hogwarts, he seemed more like a boy in search of a shield than a lion in search of a fight, and yet the hat placed him among the boldest. The question still lingers, why? Peter was not brave, he was timid, he was not noble, he was opportunistic, and he certainly never stood his ground when danger came. As early as their school years, it became obvious to the observant that Peter followed James and Sirius not out of camaraderie, but out of self-preservation. He clung to their shadows, seeking protection and glory by association. The Gryffindor table cheered for all four marauders, but Peter's cheer was always a fraction behind the others, a mimicry rather than genuine joy. Hufflepuff would have been a better soil for Peter's growth. The house that valued loyalty, hard work, and quiet strength could have offered him something his years in Gryffindor never did: the freedom to be himself. Among the Hufflepuffs, he might not have felt the same pressure to keep up with two of the most brilliant and rebellious students in the school. He might have found peers instead of idols. The traits he lacked, loyalty, perseverance, integrity, could have been nurtured rather than masked. Helga Hufflepuff welcomed those who were just and true, not dazzling, but dependable. Peter might have had a chance at that. Even more convincingly, Slytherin whispers his name. In the shadows of that house, ambition is no sin, and survival is a skill. Peter Pettigrew, who later betrayed his closest friends for safety and power, showed cunning and self-interest far more than valor. He faked his death to escape justice. He lived as a rat for over a decade, always watching, always calculating. The resourcefulness required to maintain such a facade speaks of a Slytherin mind. "Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that," said the Hat once to Harry. That path, dark and winding as it may be, was Peter's chosen road. But he never walked into the dungeons. He sat under the Sorting Hat and likely whispered a wish, a hope to be placed with James. And the Hat, which listens as much as it judges, obliged. The Hat had done this before. Difficult, very difficult, it had mused with Harry. Plenty of courage, I see, not a bad mind either, and a thirst to prove yourself. In Peter's case, it saw the opposite, the absence of courage, the lack of leadership. But perhaps it also saw fear, and fear is a powerful motivator. Fear of rejection, fear of loneliness. The Hat may have reasoned that Peter would find courage in the company of the brave. That proximity to lions would turn the mouse into a hero, but it miscalculated. Peter did not rise to meet their example. He hid beneath it. The marauders called him Wormtail, and the nickname was fitting in ways they never intended. He slinked, he scurried, he avoided conflict. He deferred to their brilliance and never challenged their wrongs. When Sirius encouraged dangerous stunts, Peter laughed too loudly. When James mocked others, Peter joined in just late enough to avoid notice. By fifth year, even Remus, the most empathetic of the four, must have seen the cracks. Peter contributed little to the Animagus transformation project. It was James and Sirius who pushed the boundaries of magical knowledge. Peter followed, learning just enough to transform into a rat. It suited him too well. The smallest, the least threatening, the least noticeable. It wasn't just a form, it was an identity, an escape, an advantage. When Remus transformed into a werewolf, Peter darted into holes. James stood firm as a stag. Sirius snarled as a dog. Peter vanished as a rodent. Even Minerva McGonagall once hinted at Peter's incongruity. "I never thought he had it in him," she said in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, referring to the betrayal of Lily and James. She wasn't alone in that assessment. Most of the wizarding world believed Peter had died defending his friends. They believed in the Gryffindor image, the lie he wore like a cloak. But bravery is not pretending to die for your friends. Bravery is not choosing the easy betrayal. Peter's choices speak louder than any school badge he once wore. During the First Wizarding War, Peter's loyalties were tested. Unlike the other marauders, he didn't fight, he didn't resist, he observed, he weighed options, and he chose Voldemort, the side of fear, power, and protection. A Gryffindor faces fear. A Slytherin manipulates it. Peter manipulated it. He delivered James and Lily to their deaths not because he hated them, but because he wanted to live. That is not cowardice alone. It's calculation. It's Slytherin survival instinct. One cannot ignore that the Sorting Hat, has made other questionable choices. It placed Neville Longbottom in Gryffindor, a boy who couldn't even remember his wand until 4th year. And yet Neville proved the hat right. He became a warrior, a leader, a symbol of quiet heroism. The hat, it seems, does not only sort for traits, but for potential. Perhaps it hoped for Peter to grow, but Peter's growth was inward, secretive, manipulative. He became stronger, yes, but not nobler. There is no example more telling than his final moment with Harry. In the Deathly Hallows, when Peter hesitated, when his own silver hand, gifted by Voldemort, strangled him for that hesitation, it revealed the ultimate truth. Deep within him, Peter still held a sliver of guilt, a trace of conflict. He died not because he stood for something. He died because he faltered. He could not even carry his betrayal to the end. That hesitation, with that flash of remembered loyalty, cost him everything. Not a Gryffindor's defiance, not a Hufflepuff's endurance, not a Ravenclaw's logic, a Slytherin's miscalculation. The Marauders never truly trusted Peter. He was the secret keeper only because Sirius believed Voldemort would never suspect someone so unimportant. Sirius said as much, "I would have died rather than betray my friends." Peter did not. That contrast, that cold reality, exposes the cracks in the hat's decision. When the stakes were highest, Peter did not rise. He sank. And yet Peter was not without talent, became an unregistered animagus. He faked his death with devastating success. He embedded himself in a family of wizards, deceiving Arthur and Molly Weasley for years. He kidnapped Bertha Jorkins, helped resurrect Voldemort, and crafted the potion that restored the Dark Lord's body. These were not the acts of a fool. They were the acts of someone who knew how to play a long game. If the hat ever weighed ambition, resourcefulness, and a willingness to achieve ends by any means, Slytherin should have been its answer. Remus Lupin, the kindest of the four, once remarked that Peter had been always too weak, too afraid, to ever stand alone. That truth aligns poorly with the lion's roar. Peter's life was defined by submission to stronger forces. First James and Sirius, then Voldemort. Even the hand that killed him was not his own. It was a gift from his master. He died strangled by the loyalty he could not uphold, and the master he could not defy. The Sorting Hat is not infallible. It sees into the heart, but the heart is not a finished story at 11. Peter's desire to belong likely overrode every whisper of truth. "Please put me with them," he may have begged. He wanted to bask in James's light, to hide behind Sirius's strength. The hat, swayed by his plea, gambled, it lost, and with it, so did many others. In another timeline, Peter Pettigrew in Hufflepuff might have found integrity. Among students who valued steady effort and friendship, he might have learned to stand without needing to hide. In Slytherin, he might have been recognized for what he was: clever, adaptive, and self-serving. Perhaps he would have risen as a powerful figure under Voldemort, not hiding as a rat, but standing as a strategist. In Gryffindor, he was a fraud, a sheep in lion's fur. Peter's betrayal was not a moment. It was a slow unraveling, a lifetime of quiet choices made from fear, not conviction. The House of Godric Gryffindor could not redeem him because it never reflected him. The House of Salazar Slytherin might have accepted him, might have prepared the world for what he was, might have given him a path more honest to his soul. But instead, he wore red, and the world believed he was brave, until it was too late. Number 19, Cedric Digory. Cedric Digory was the kind of student teachers remembered fondly, not just for his grades, which were excellent, but for the way he treated others, with decency, calm strength, and unwavering fairness. As a proud Hufflepuff, he embodied the house's values in full. But the truth is, the Sorting Hat hesitated. Not because Cedric lacked Hufflepuff qualities, he was as loyal and hard-working as they came, but because the flicker of Gryffindor's courage burned just as brightly in him. In that brief, silent moment under the Sorting Hat's brim, two paths stood before Cedric Digory, and although he chose loyalty, he could have just as easily chosen bravery. During the Triwizard Tournament, Cedric's actions painted a portrait not just of a competent wizard, but of a noble one. Selected as Hogwarts' rightful champion, he stood tall with dignity and modesty, never letting the attention change who he was. He didn't seek out glory, it came to him, and he bore it with quiet pride. When Harry Potter's name came unexpectedly from the Goblet of Fire, Cedric had every reason to resent him. His rightful spotlight was dimmed, and the whispers in the halls were cruel. Yet Cedric never joined the sneering. He walked past them. He let his actions speak. When the dragons were announced as the first task, Cedric didn't hesitate to give Harry the benefit of a warning, not out of strategy, but fairness. It was Moody, really Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise, who urged Harry to return the favour, and when he did, Cedric listened. He could have dismissed Harry, he could have ignored him, but he didn't. He recognised the spirit of mutual aid and understood the quiet language of honour. That decision alone marked Cedric not only as a teammate, but as a man of character. It's during the second task that Cedric's sense of justice shines again. He gave Harry a clue, not under pressure, not because of pity, but because he believed in balance. Cedric did not believe in winning through secrecy or unfair advantage. He gave Harry a lead about the golden egg, and even though he was competing, he did not fear giving another a chance. That generosity was not Hufflepuff's kindness alone. It echoed the Gryffindor spirit, the belief that honour comes from action, not outcome. Dumbledore once said, "You are protected in short by your ability to love." Cedric Digory may never have spoken great declarations of love or virtue, but he showed it constantly in how he treated others. He loved justice, and he loved his school. In the third task, he once again proved that his idea of victory was not about leaving others behind. When he and Harry reached the cup at the same time, he did not lunge for it, nor did he suggest fighting. Instead, he said, "You take it. You should win." It wasn't false modesty, it was true humility, the kind only those with nothing to prove can afford. That moment in the maze defines Cedric more than any spell he ever cast. He had been injured, he had been attacked, and he had saved Harry from Crumb, who had been placed under the imperious curse. He had earned his right to that cup 100 times over, and yet when he stood at the edge of victory, he offered it away. It was Harry who insisted they take it together. Cedric agreed, smiling. Together. That one word, whispered moments before his death, still lingers as one of the most powerful in the series. In that moment, Cedric was not only a Hufflepuff, he was every inch a Gryffindor. The Sorting Hat once told Harry that it is our choices that show what we truly are far more than our abilities. Cedric chose fairness over advantage, he chose justice over competition, he chose solidarity over victory. And in doing so, he showed that courage isn't always about slaying dragons or facing down Dark Lords. Sometimes courage is helping your rival. Sometimes it's trusting others. Sometimes it's standing by your values even when no one's watching. Cedric's demeanour was never brash. He didn't carry the swagger of a Gryffindor like Sirius Black or James Potter. His bravery was not loud, it was quiet, like a fire, burning low but steady in a cold room. In the Great Hall, he was the one who helped younger students find their seats. On the Quidditch pitch, he didn't taunt or boast. He played hard, played fair, and walked off the field without theatrics. When he defeated Harry in an earlier match, he didn't celebrate. He recognized that Harry had fallen from his broom because of Dementors and tried to call off the win. That's not just sportsmanship, that's honor. There's a certain irony to the fact that Cedric's death was orchestrated by a coward. Voldemort, desperate to rise again, needed a sacrifice. He chose the nearest boy, someone kind, decent, and full of life. Wormtail, trembling and obedient, cast the curse. But even in death, Cedric left a mark. His death was not in vain, and it haunted those who survived. It lit a fire in Harry, it shook Dumbledore, it echoed through Hogwarts like a warning bell, telling everyone that the war had truly begun. Some fans have often speculated about what Cedric could have achieved had he lived. He would have been a brilliant auror, some say, or perhaps a professor, or even a leader in magical law enforcement. But the truth is, Cedric had already achieved more in life than many do in decades. He had already chosen his path, not through career, but through integrity. He had already been tested in the fires of the tournament and emerged whole. When others faltered, he remained steady. When others grabbed, he gave. When others doubted, he trusted. In a way, Cedric is a bridge between houses. He represents the best of Hufflepuff, kindness, patience, loyalty, but also the nobility of Gryffindor, bravery, honor, and self-sacrifice. He is proof that the four houses are not rigid boxes, but overlapping shades of identity. As McGonagall once said, the sorting hat considers many factors. It doesn't just see what we are, it sees what we could be, and Cedric Digory could have been many things. There's something inherently Gryffindor in Cedric's decision to share the cup. Gryffindors believe in glory, yes, but also in fairness. They believe in standing shoulder to shoulder with their comrades. In that final moment in the maze, Cedric didn't see Harry as a rival. He saw him as a fellow warrior. The kind of heart that can look at competition and choose unity instead is not just brave, it is heroic. Even the way Cedric faced his death was Gryffindor-worthy. He had no idea what was coming when the cup transported him to the graveyard. One minute he was standing on Hogwarts grounds, and the next he was surrounded by shadows and tombstones. When Voldemort ordered his death, Cedric did not plead. He stood where he was, frozen but not running. He didn't scream. He met the end with the kind of stillness that only the truly strong possess. His death was tragic, but not empty. It set the stage for everything that followed. Perhaps that's what makes Cedric's story so poignant. He did not live long enough to become a legend, but he lived just long enough to become a symbol of everything Hogwarts hoped its students would be, not just brilliant in magic or bold in combat, but human in the truest sense, kind, brave, just. It is telling that Dumbledore gave such weight to Cedric's memory in the closing speech of that year. Remember Cedric Digory, a boy who was kind and brave and true. Those words ring with both sorrow and pride. It's tempting to wonder how different the story might have been if Cedric had been in Gryffindor. Would he have stood alongside Harry in the DA? Would he have fought at the Battle of Hogwarts? Perhaps. But perhaps he had already fought his greatest battle in the maze, choosing decency over ambition, equality over triumph. The house he was sorted into did not define the man. His actions did. When young wizards and witches step into Hogwarts, they often ask the sorting hat not to put them in Slytherin. Few plead for Hufflepuff. And yet Cedric Digory makes a strong case that perhaps they should, because in him we see that quiet strength is no less powerful than roaring courage. We see that greatness isn't always forged in war cries, but in silent choices to be good when no one demands it. It is no exaggeration to say that Cedric's legacy endured far beyond his death. His story influenced Harry's views on leadership and fairness. In The Order of the Phoenix, when Harry starts the DA, it's Cedric's death that gives weight to his purpose. He doesn't want anyone else to die without knowing how to fight back. That sense of urgency, that need to prepare others, is born from the horror of seeing someone good fall for no reason at all. Cedric became the reason Harry began to teach. In the final book, when Harry uses the resurrection stone, he brings back those he lost, his parents, Sirius, Lupin. But Cedric is not among them. not because he meant less, but perhaps because Cedric had no unfinished business. His death was cruel, but his life was complete. He had loved, helped, and stood tall. He had nothing to apologize for and nothing to amend. The Sorting Hat may have put Cedric in Hufflepuff, but the truth is he could have worn scarlet and gold with pride. He had the soul of a lion and the heart of a badger. And sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who do not chase heroism at all. They simply live well, love deeply, and choose the right thing, even when it costs them everything. Number 20. Helena Ravenclaw, the Grey Lady. Helena Ravenclaw stood at the crossroads of identity, between the pull of wisdom and the hunger for greatness. Known in the Hogwarts halls as the Grey Lady, the silent and elegant ghost of Ravenclaw Tower, her ethereal presence veiled the deep scars of her mortal past. Though remembered now only as the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw, founder of the house that prizes intellect above all, Helena was far more than a dutiful daughter of knowledge. She was brilliant, yes, but also ambitious, prideful, and determined to surpass the very legacy she was born into. Qualities like these, despite the robes she wore as a Ravenclaw student, bore a striking resemblance to the characteristics celebrated in the green and silver of Slytherin House. The Sorting Hat has never been a mere artifact. It is a living embodiment of the founder's insight, capable of peering into the very soul of a student. In Helena's case, its task could not have been simple. She had the cleverness Rowena would admire, the introspective mind hungry for mysteries and ideas. But within that same mind flickered the cold fire of ambition, the silent scream of a young girl who refused to live in her mother's shadow. That voice, quiet but relentless, whispered not only of knowledge but of power, the kind of power that shapes destinies. Helena did not merely wish to learn, she yearned to become someone greater than even the woman who built Hogwarts. At some point during her years at the school, Helena's thoughts turned darker. The diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw, a magical artifact said to enhance the wisdom of its wearer, became not a symbol of her heritage but a trophy of conquest. Her decision to steal it was not born from innocent curiosity. It was a rebellion, an assertion of independence, a declaration that she would no longer be her mother's daughter in shadow, but her rival in light. Helena, who was learned, yes, but also proud, far too proud, Professor Binns once noted in a rare digression from his usual monotone. The choice to take the diadem and flee to Albania was the turning point that betrayed her true internal conflict, intellect and ambition warring within her, with ambition prevailing. The diadem itself symbolizes the duality of Helena's spirit. While it is meant to heighten wisdom, it became for Helena a totem of superiority. Her theft was not about enhancing her intellect, it was about proving a point. That desire is familiar to every Slytherin who has walked the castle's stone floors. Like Tom Riddle centuries later, Helena sought something greater than mere learning. She sought the power that learning could provide, and like Tom, she paid the price for it. Her tragic story deepens with the involvement of the Bloody Baron, another ghost bound to Hogwarts by murder and regret. He had loved Helena, or so he believed. When Rowena fell ill and sent him to retrieve her daughter, it set the stage for a final chapter, drenched in blood. The Baron's obsession and Helena's defiance collided in the forests of Albania. In a fit of rage, he killed her. Then, consumed by horror, he killed himself. That dual death bound them to Hogwarts forever, two spirits unable to rest, each a mirror of the other's worst sin. It is telling that the Baron was from Slytherin. His violence, his possessiveness, and his obsession with control were extremes of the same ambition Helena once nurtured in silence. They were drawn to one another, not merely by attraction, but by shared shadows. This connection reinforces the idea that Helena could have easily worn green instead of blue. The Sorting Hat has been known to delay decisions for those who straddle house boundaries. Difficult, very difficult, Plenty of courage, I see, not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a thirst to prove yourself. Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that, it once said to Harry. One wonders what it whispered to Helena all those centuries before. Helena's pride ultimately cost her everything, her mother's love, her chance at redemption, and her life. Rowena Ravenclaw, brilliant and poised, died with a broken heart, never reconciled with her only child. The legacy of Ravenclaw House was cracked not by war or politics, but by the personal rift between two generations of women who both sought greatness on their own terms. Rowena may have intended her house to stand for wisdom, but through Helena we see how easily wisdom can become a blade in the wrong hands. That tension between brilliance and ego is not unique to Ravenclaws. It's the core of every Slytherin tragedy. Helena's story reverberates through time, especially when juxtaposed with other students who faced similar crossroads. Severus Snape, for instance, was sorted into Slytherin because of his ambition and cunning, despite his profound intellect and love for potions and knowledge. Hermione Granger, a Ravenclaw in spirit, was placed in Gryffindor because of her courage and loyalty. The sorting hat does not always choose what is most obvious. It chooses what the heart desires, or sometimes what the heart resists. If Helena had been placed in Slytherin, perhaps her story would have unfolded differently. She might have found mentors who would embrace and mold her ambition, who would teach her the responsibility that must accompany power. In Ravenclaw, she was among scholars, but not among guides who understood her thirst to be more. Surrounded by those who prized intellect, Helena learned how to think, but perhaps never how to feel. Her isolation grew, her pride festered, and without a path toward greatness, she stole one. In the lore of Hogwarts, much is made of artifacts. The sword of Gryffindor, the cup of Hufflepuff, the locket of Slytherin, and the diadem of Ravenclaw each represent the essence of their houses. But in the end, the diadem became a Horcrux, tainted by Voldemort, another Slytherin whose ambition outpaced his morality. That the object Helena stole to elevate herself would later be used by someone like Tom Riddle is not coincidence, it's poetic. Both sought immortality, both fled to Albania, both were betrayed by their own desires. Helena's legacy was not only stained, it was used. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione learn the truth about the Grey Lady in Deathly Hallows, she is reluctant to speak. Her ghostly form seems composed, but her pain simmers just beneath the surface. I stole the diadem, she finally admits. I sought to make myself cleverer, more important than my mother. I ran away with it. This moment is more than confession. It's an acknowledgement of a truth she had denied, even in death. She had never truly wanted wisdom. She had wanted recognition. What makes Helena's tale particularly haunting is that her punishment was eternal. She did not just die young, she remained in the world she betrayed, roaming the same halls, watching generations of students strive for greatness she could never attain. Unlike nearly headless Nick or the Fat Friar, whose ghostly existences contain a hint of humour, Helena's is marked by silence, regret, and the cold dignity of someone who once dared to rise above the rest and fell. The irony is sharp. The ghost who represents the House of Intellect is defined by a moment of emotional weakness, not a failure of logic. And in that moment she revealed her truest self, not as a seeker of wisdom, but as a girl who wanted to be seen, a girl who wanted to matter, a girl who, had the sorting hat tilted ever so slightly, might have worn the serpent's emblem instead of the eagle's. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is that Helena Ravenclaw was both misplaced and misunderstood. Her intelligence was undeniable, but intelligence alone does not define a Ravenclaw, nor does ambition alone a Slytherin. It's the purpose behind these traits that makes all the difference. Helena's purpose was to eclipse her mother. That's not the quest of a scholar, it's the mission of a rival. Even in the larger story of Hogwarts, Helena's life offers a cautionary tale. She reminds us that houses are not merely labels, but lenses that shape how students are nurtured, how they interpret their gifts, and how they measure success. In the wrong house, even brilliance can rot into bitterness. And for Helena, that rot lasted beyond the grave. One cannot look at the great hall during feasts with banners hanging from the ceiling and not wonder how many students have been placed in houses that reflect only a fragment of their souls. Helena Ravenclaw, the Grey Lady, floats in that great chamber, not as a proud Ravenclaw, but as a ghost whose house never truly fit. Her gaze often lingers not on the blue and bronze, but on the children who rise above the need for approval. Children who learn that wisdom is not measured by what you take, but by what you give. And so Helena watches. She watches when students walk past her without a word. She listens when they whisper her name in curiosity. But she never speaks unless she must. She guards the secret not of a diadem, but of her mistake. She is not just a ghost of a student. She is a symbol of a path not taken, of a house she could have called home, of a choice that still echoes through the stones of Hogwarts. Number 21, Lily Luna Potter. In the quiet corridors of fan speculation, there lingers a name not often explored in the pages of canon, but radiant with possibility: Lily Luna Potter. The youngest child of Harry Potter and Ginny Weasley, she is mentioned fleetingly in the epilogue of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, waving enthusiastically at her older brothers as they board the Hogwarts Express. Yet this brief moment sparked a sea of interpretations. While J.K. Rowling never elaborated on Lily Luna's future, the wizarding world has not hesitated to imagine what could have been. Born of two Gryffindor legends and named after Lily Evans and Luna Lovegood, she carries a heritage that defies easy categorization. Despite the strength of her Gryffindor roots, many fans argue that the Sorting Hat might have wavered, hovering between red and blue, lion and raven, courage and wit. The very name Lily Luna hints at duality. Lily Evans, Harry's mother, was known for her deep empathy, her intelligence, and her non-judgmental heart. Severus Snape, in his most vulnerable memories, called her the brightest witch of her year. She challenged bigotry, excelled in charms and potions, and maintained a sense of independent justice that transcended houses. Luna Lovegood, the whimsical namesake, was a Ravenclaw through and through, but not of the traditional mould. She was eccentric, yes, but also piercingly wise. To be named after two such different women, one logical and grounded, the other ethereal and intuitive, makes Lily Luna a vessel of opposites. It is in this space between categories that Ravenclaw begins to make its claim. Ravenclaw House is not merely for those who score high in exams or memorize facts. It is for those who question the world with relentless curiosity. The Sorting Hat itself reminds us of this in its rhyme, or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Wit in this context includes a love of learning, but also a love of mystery. Lily Luna, by all assumptions of her upbringing, would have grown up surrounded by stories, not only heroic tales of the Battle of Hogwarts, but also Luna's ethereal narratives about thestrals, nargles, and the mysteries of the universe. This upbringing would have encouraged a mind open to both logic and wonder. It's not difficult to imagine Lily Luna at the sorting ceremony, the hat gently debating in her mind. Gryffindor, it might have mused, like your parents, brave, bold, eager to defend. But then another thought would creep in. But there's a sharpness here, an imagination, a thirst for understanding, perhaps not to lead, but to explore. The fan theory of a near Ravenclaw Lily Luna gains more credibility when one considers how Rowling described the Sorting Hat's decisions. The hat does not merely assess one trait, it considers choices, complexity, and inner conflict. It placed Hermione in Gryffindor despite her academic brilliance. It sent Neville to Gryffindor despite his insecurity. Why then would it not pause at Lily Luna's? Divergent soul. Her relationship with Albus Severus Potter also adds depth to this theory. Albus was sorted into Slytherin, the only Potter child to defy Gryffindor tradition. This fact alone reshaped how the family's legacy was perceived. It normalized deviation. If Albus could embrace cunning and introspection, Lily Luna could embrace intellect and curiosity. In many fan stories, she is the sibling who bridges the emotional gap between James Sirius's mischievous bravado and Albus's introverted skepticism. Lily is often portrayed as observant, able to intuit dynamics in a room, quick to recognize the unsaid. These are not purely Gryffindor traits. They lean toward the internal logic of Ravenclaw. There's also the notion of laughter and light. Ravenclaws are not humorless. Luna Lovegood herself, despite her serene demeanor, had a particular charm that lightened the mood of those around her. Her oddities often brought joy, not discomfort. Lily Luna, described in fan communities as cheerful and energetic, would carry this trait into Ravenclaw Tower, not to be the archetype of a quiet scholar, but to redefine what it means to be one. In the common room beneath the star-strewn ceiling, she might have organized debates about wand lore or giggled over astronomy charts, her curiosity infectious and electric. The parallels to her grandmother cannot be ignored. Lily Evans was Muggle-born but quickly rose to the top of her class. She was fiercely independent, refused to follow the crowd, and remained loyal to her beliefs. Her deep interest in potions and her ability to excel at Hogwarts reflected a mind that thrived on challenge and learning. These are classic Ravenclaw traits. That she was placed in Gryffindor suggests her bravery was tempered with intellect. If Lily Luna inherited the same fusion, but tilted slightly more toward the intellectual, then the Sorting Hat would have been in a real quandary. James Potter's own legacy complicates this further. The original James was impulsive, brilliant, and arrogant in equal parts. He excelled in transfiguration, suggesting that raw magical talent ran deep in the Potter line. If Lily Luna inherited this magical prowess, then her time at Hogwarts would not be about proving herself, but about discovering herself. She would not need the validation of Gryffindor's banner to confirm her worth. She might seek the hidden histories of Hogwarts, pore over old texts in the library, and pursue magic with a sense of wonder, not warfare. Another compelling clue is her possible connection with magical creatures. Luna Lovegood's name being part of hers is not merely symbolic, it hints at an affinity for the unseen. Magical creatures are not just whimsical additions to Rowling's world, they represent different kinds of understanding. A thestral can only be seen by those who have witnessed death and accepted its truth. Luna taught Harry how to see, not just with his eyes, but with his spirit. If Lily Luna were the kind of student to sneak into the Forbidden Forest, not to break rules, but to speak to centaurs, study bowtruckles, or quietly observe the flight of a hippogriff, she would be embodying the Ravenclaw spirit in its purest form. Specific examples from the canon support this broader reading of character complexity. Take the moment in Order of the Phoenix, when Luna tells Harry, "Things we lose have a way of coming back to us in the end, if not always in the way we expect." This is not merely whimsy, it's philosophical, it's Ravenclaw at its most profound. A child named after this woman, especially one growing up hearing such wisdom firsthand, might internalize these lessons deeply. She would likely be the sort of girl to question the structure of spellwork, to rewrite charms for efficiency, to seek out the roots of magical theory instead of settling for incantations passed down by rote. The Sorting Hat's internal monologue, as heard through Harry in Philosopher's Stone, also matters here. Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a thirst to prove yourself. That final phrase often swings the balance. Lily Luna, however, might not have a thirst to prove herself. Unlike Harry, who carried the burden of prophecy, or even Hermione, who had to assert her place among purebloods, Lily Luna might come to Hogwarts without the need to dominate. She might simply want to understand. And this desire, not pride, not bravery, could tip the scales. Her parents, too, would support any choice. Harry, having told Albus that the bravest man I ever knew was in Slytherin, would never begrudge his daughter for choosing a different path. Ginny, having played Quidditch, fought in Dumbledore's army, and challenged her brothers, would surely recognize that true strength lies in authenticity. A Ravenclaw Lily Luna would still be a Potter, and that name, with all its legacy, would shine just as brightly from any tower. And then there's the fans' speculation around Lily Luna's future career. Many imagine her becoming a magizoologist, perhaps joining forces with Rolf Scamander, or pioneering a new branch of magical anthropology. Others see her as an author, chronicling the secret traditions of old magical families, or an unspeakable, working deep within the Department of Mysteries. These are not Gryffindor fantasies. They are dreams woven from research, wonder, and a hunger for knowledge. They are the future of a Ravenclaw. Ravenclaws are not always loud, nor are they always strange. Some are precise, like Filius Flitwick. Others are unpredictable, like Garrick Ollivander. Still others, like Helena Ravenclaw herself, are burdened with emotional depths that remain hidden beneath intellect. Lily Luna, by virtue of her lineage and her namesakes, would carry a portion of each. And in the quiet of the tower, where riddles guard the door and moonlight fills the air, she might find a peace that no other house could offer. Even her wand might reflect this. Perhaps fashioned from silver lime or cherry, with a core of phoenix feather, a nod to the past, but curved with mystery. Perhaps she excels in charms and arithmancy, drawing sigils late into the night while her classmates sleep. Perhaps her patronus is a fox, clever, agile, and loyal in its own way. These images may not be canon, but they spring logically from the soil of what we know. In one popular fanfiction series, Lily Luna becomes a seer, not in the clumsy Trelawney mould, but with quiet clarity. She reads signs in the stars, studies the ancient runes, and speaks truths in riddles. She becomes a bridge between generations, a magic balanced by intellect and instinct. This idea might not be endorsed by Rowling, but it resonates. It captures what Ravenclaw might offer, the freedom to be more than brave, more than loyal, just deeply, truly oneself. There are other Potter children. James Sirius, the eldest, is often imagined as a prankster like his namesake, energetic and daring. Albus Severus is contemplative, serious, his Slytherin sorting stirring endless debates. But Lily Luna, as the youngest, is the one who breaks the pattern not by defying it, but by embodying its harmony. She does not rebel, she transforms. In her, the Potter legacy evolves. Perhaps that is why, when the sorting hat rests on her head, it hesitates, not out of doubt, but respect. Because Lily Luna Potter is not just a reflection of the past, she is a question mark, a star chart, a riddle waiting to be solved. And in that moment of hesitation, one hears the voice of Rowena Ravenclaw herself, whispering from the stone, "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure." Number 22. Albus Severus Potter. Albus Severus Potter boarded the Hogwarts Express with a heart heavier than he let on. His hands were clenched in his lap, hidden under the folds of his robe. All around him students laughed, rushed to compartments, and waved at parents on the platform, but Albus sat quietly, watching the scarlet blur of the train window. He was not his brother James, loud, confident, already joking about hexes and detentions. Albus had questions instead of jokes, worries instead of certainty, and a growing fear that he didn't belong in the world everyone said he was born for. He remembered his father's words as the train began to pull away. "Slytherin's not bad. Your name comes from 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin." Albus heard it again and again in his head. But what if it wasn't just a possibility? What if the sorting hat saw something in him that no one else did, that even he didn't yet understand? What if he truly belonged there? The anxiety wasn't rooted in the reputation of the house, not really. It came from the weight of the name he bore, Albus Severus Potter, a name that danced on the edge of opposites, wisdom and loyalty, courage and cunning, Gryffindor and Slytherin. His father had named him after two men who had once hated each other, Dumbledore and Snape, men who ultimately found common ground, but whose lives had been torn by war, secrets, and pain. Albus didn't know which half of his name would shape him more. He hoped, perhaps foolishly, that he might live up to both. And that hope would soon be tested, because when the sorting hat touched his head, it didn't scream Gryffindor like it had for James. It paused. "You have potential," the hat whispered, weighing centuries of experience against the boy's trembling soul. "Ambition, self-doubt, intelligence, a thirst to prove yourself. You could do well in Slytherin." The hat lingered. It did not immediately choose. Albus sat beneath it, heart pounding, knowing every second felt like an eternity. In those long moments, he was not the son of the boy who lived. He was simply a boy who didn't know who he was. Albus's story was never meant to be straightforward. He was born into legacy and contradiction, unlike his namesake Dumbledore, who had been drawn to power and then turned away from it, or Severus Snape, who lived with guilt and disguised bravery. Albus was thrust into expectations before he even understood himself. The sorting hat recognized this complexity. It saw the same uncertainty and weight that had rested on Severus Snape's shoulders, the same longing for acceptance. It saw ambition, not the dark, manipulative kind, but the quiet yearning to be something more than a shadow. In Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, readers see this inner conflict surface. Albus is not the ideal Hogwarts student. He struggles academically, fails to form easy friendships, and constantly feels like a disappointment. His only real friendship forms with Scorpius Malfoy, a boy whose name evokes a whole other set of inherited burdens. Together they find solace in the fact that they are both outcasts, both trying to carve a place in a world that won't let them forget their surnames. The sorting hat might have been right to hesitate. In Scorpius, Albus finds the type of friendship that Slytherin House historically encouraged, deep, loyal, and strategic. Their bond was not built on shared house pride or popularity, but on mutual alienation. Had Albus been placed in Slytherin, it's likely he would have met Scorpius on the first day and formed that bond even sooner. He might have avoided some of the loneliness that plagued his early years at Hogwarts. Albus was curious in ways that mirrored a Slytherin mind. He broke rules, not with Gryffindor daring, but with Slytherin precision. He didn't rebel for fun, but with purpose. When he steals a time-turner with Scorpius, it's not an impulsive act of recklessness. It's deliberate, born from his belief that he could change the past to save someone his father could not, Cedric Digory. This act, misguided though it was, reveals a quintessential Slytherin trait. He wanted to rewrite history, to do what others had failed to do, not for fame, but to prove something to himself, to the world, and perhaps to the name he carried. There's a scene in The Cursed Child where Albus declares bitterly, "I didn't choose to be his son." That line is a crack in the mask. It's not about rejecting Harry, but rejecting the mold he's being forced into. It's the voice of a boy who wants to be seen as more than an echo. Slytherin would have understood that. The house that shaped Tom Riddle also shaped Severus Snape and Merlin. It could have given Albus the space to discover his strengths without comparison to his father's past. Many fans argue that the sorting hat might have erred in placing him in Gryffindor. It is not uncommon for the hat to allow the student's choice to sway the decision. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Harry himself pleads not Slytherin, and the hat relents. It's likely that Albus, burdened with fear, hoped the hat would choose anything but Slytherin. And so it did, but fear is not clarity. The hat may have ignored the truer voice, the one buried beneath doubt. Albus shared much with his namesake Snape. Both were quiet, introspective, and often misunderstood. Both were brave in ways that weren't always visible. And both carried love, Snape for Lily and Albus for his friend Scorpius, with deep, unspoken loyalty. Slytherin House thrives on subtlety and personal ambition, but it also cultivates loyalty and resourcefulness. Albus in many ways embodied all those traits. Yet he was placed where he would feel like an outsider, perhaps because that was the story the Hat thought he needed. Had Albus been in Slytherin, one wonders how much would have changed. His relationship with Scorpius would have formed under less scrutiny. The teasing and bullying he endured from Gryffindor peers might have been avoided. Even his relationship with Harry may have taken a different turn. From the outside, it looked like a divide had grown between father and son, but maybe, just maybe, that divide began the moment the Hat shouted Gryffindor instead of what might have been a better fit. It's worth noting that Slytherin House, by the time of Albus's arrival, had begun a slow but steady transformation. The war had ended decades before. The old prejudices, though not fully gone, had started to erode. There were still parents who sneered at Muggleborns and still ghosts of the past in the corridors, but Slytherin House was no longer just a refuge for the ambitious and the cruel. A new generation was emerging, students like Scorpius Malfoy, kind-hearted, witty, and burdened with rumours he didn't deserve. Albus could have been a part of this renewal. His presence in Slytherin might have been symbolic, a Potter finally bridging the gap between two houses long at odds. It would have challenged the old stereotypes. Gryffindor and Slytherin, once pitted against each other in legend and war, would have been joined by blood. Albus Severus Potter could have stood as a new emblem, proof that the future didn't have to repeat the divisions of the past. The journey Albus takes with Scorpius through time is an accidental allegory for this very idea. Each timeline they break leads to destruction. In one, Voldemort returns. In another, Cedric becomes a Death Eater. But the constant in all these broken futures is Albus's desperation to prove something. That desperation is not Gryffindor's bravery, but Slytherin's hunger. Hunger to leave a mark, to rewrite what has been written. This is the legacy of Severus Snape flowing through him. One of the most poignant moments in the play is when Harry, at last, accepts who Albus is, not who he should be. That acceptance is the turning point. It could have come earlier had Albus been given the space to explore his identity without the Gryffindor framework pressing upon him. For years, Slytherin had been painted in dark colours. But for Albus, it might have been the place where he could have been free from comparison, free to be Albus, not the second son, not the lesser Potter. It's not just that he could have been in Slytherin, it's that maybe he should have been, not as punishment or as an oddity, but as a step toward healing the rift that defined so much of Hogwarts' history. Albus wasn't a warrior like James, nor a hero like Harry. He was something else, a mirror to the past and a window to a different kind of future, one that embraced complexity, contradiction, and the courage to be misunderstood. Albus Severus Potter was named for two men who defied the expectations of their time. Dumbledore, who once sought power but gave it up for the greater good. Snape, who lived a life of deception to protect the child of the woman he loved. Albus, placed in Gryffindor, tried to live up to both, but his heart may have been elsewhere. Not in darkness, but in green and silver halls where ambition and loyalty walked hand in hand. In many ways, the Sorting Hat's hesitation was a confession. It didn't have a perfect answer. That hesitation tells us something important. Albus Severus Potter was not born to fit neatly into a single house. He was meant to straddle two worlds, and in doing so he became a living symbol of the reconciliation his name hinted at from the beginning. Perhaps the Hat was right to choose Gryffindor, but perhaps, just perhaps, a different choice would have been just as great. Number 23, Horace Slughorn. Horace Slughorn settled into the dungeon classroom like a toad in a gilded pond, plump with comfort and surrounded by the trappings of prestige. With walls lined by dark wooden shelves and jars filled with ingredients worth more than a Gringotts vault, his presence radiated dignity. Yet behind the crimson velvet waistcoats and jovial moustache was a man more complex than the narrow house boundaries of Hogwarts would suggest. Though the sorting hat had placed him in Slytherin decades earlier, there is much to ponder in the idea that Horace Slughorn might have thrived brilliantly in Ravenclaw. He had all the markings of a textbook Ravenclaw: intellect, curiosity, and an enduring love for the pursuit of knowledge. His conversations often circled back to obscure ingredients, forgotten magical practices, and wizarding history. When Harry first met him, Slughorn was disguised as an overstuffed armchair, having transfigured himself in a burst of creative survivalism. That single act hinted at not just cunning, but resourcefulness of an academic kind, more Ravenclaw than Slytherin, if examined closely. It was his club, the so-called Slug Club, that most exemplified this dual nature. While Slytherin values ambition and networking as tools for personal ascent, Slughorn didn't create his elite circle for power. He curated it like a collector appraising rare artifacts. From Gwenog Jones of the Holyhead Harpies to Marcus Belby, whose uncle invented the Wolfsbane potion, Slughorn's interest lay in brilliance and potential, not lineage alone. He wanted to be near excellence, not to exploit it, but to revel in its glow. Horace admired exceptional minds. He did not envy them, he sought to be close to them. "I like to collect people," he once said, with a sheepish smile, half apologetic, half proud. This collecting impulse wasn't entirely selfish. Yes, he enjoyed the comfort of good connections, but he also thrived in their company because they fed his ever-hungry intellect. He was a man who once taught Lily Evans, and years later still remembered the precise inflection in her voice as she questioned the properties of a bezoar. His teaching, too, bore the hallmarks of a Ravenclaw heart. He was patient, thoughtful, and utterly invested in his subject. In Slughorn's classroom, the cauldron became a philosopher's crucible, not just a place to mix ingredients. He taught the draught of living death not as a recipe, but as a riddle to be solved. When Harry managed to concoct a flawless potion with the help of the Half-Blood Prince's annotations, Slughorn wasn't angry, he was enchanted. "Outstanding, my boy," he exclaimed, eyes gleaming not with jealousy but wonder. There was joy in his work. Unlike Snape, who wielded potions as weapons, Slughorn approached them with reverence. He valued the elegance of a perfectly balanced brew, the alchemical harmony of logic and instinct. Such meticulous fascination mirrors Rowena Ravenclaw's ideals far more than Salazar Slytherin's hunger for legacy and blood purity. Slughorn's affinity for the subject wasn't tactical, it was romantic. He was, above all, in love with learning. Even his retreat from Hogwarts before the events of Half-Blood Prince speaks to a certain vulnerability that seems less Slytherin and more Ravenclaw. When danger loomed, Horace did not plot. He hid. He turned himself into furniture and lived in borrowed cottages, not to manipulate, but to survive. Unlike many Slytherins who meet danger with cunning or aggression, Slughorn vanished into obscurity, not out of cowardice, but because he didn't see himself as part of the battlefield. Knowledge, not confrontation, was his domain. Consider the way he spoke of Tom Riddle, his most regrettable former student. In their memory, Slughorn praised the boy's charm, his sharpness, his natural talent for magic. But he recoiled when faced with the darkness that Riddle pursued. Slughorn's guilt over revealing the secret of Horcruxes wasn't rooted in fear of exposure, it was intellectual horror. He had contributed, even unwittingly, to a perversion of magical theory. His conscience was academic in nature. He had helped break the rules of life and death. In the Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore brings Harry to Slughorn not to flatter or manipulate him, but because he knows that Slughorn's guilt lies buried in a memory, a scholarly mistake. Dumbledore understood that the key to unlocking that guilt wasn't intimidation or temptation, but empathy. When Harry finally retrieves the memory, Slughorn's tearful admission is not the confession of a villain, but of a man who once loved knowledge too much to see where it led. In his own way, Horace worshipped books, scrolls, and secrets as sacred. He would have fit into the Ravenclaw common room with ease, where riddles guard the entrance and discourse thrives by the fireplace. Imagine him there, in a high-backed chair, sipping crystallized pineapple brandy and holding forth on the subtle difference between dragon liver and basilisk bile. He would not only belong, he would flourish. And what of his selective friendships, the hallmark that likely tilted the Sorting Hat towards Slytherin? True, Slughorn was choosy, he preferred prodigies over plodders, but this wasn't out of prejudice, it was curatorial. He saw brilliance as a painter sees colour, or a composer hears pitch. He admired the remarkable not for its usefulness, but for its rarity. Even Luna Lovegood might have fascinated him, had he been her professor, a girl so strange, yet so fiercely intelligent. Slughorn did not value blood status above all else. He prized ingenuity. He respected Muggleborns when they showed excellence. Lily Evans, again, is a key example. Her heritage did not matter to him, her questions did. Her ambition was quiet, her genius subtle, and still he called her one of the brightest I ever taught. He remembered her potion work as one recalls poetry. Her death wounded him deeply, not because she was a trophy, but because she had been a beacon of potential. His cowardice at the Battle of Hogwarts was brief, but telling. He initially fled but returned. And when he did, he fought with ferocity not typical of a man who had spent most of the war avoiding danger. He arrived beside Professor McGonagall and Kingsley Shacklebolt to duel Voldemort himself. In that moment, Slughorn was not a collector of talent, but a protector of it. The war had encroached too far on the world he loved, on knowledge, brilliance, and the young minds he had cherished. A less examined moment in the books is his presence at Dumbledore's funeral. He sits quietly, surrounded by students and teachers, lost in thought. One imagines that for Slughorn, Dumbledore's death wasn't just a blow to the Order, but a cosmic rift in the intellectual world. Dumbledore had been the greatest wizard of his time, not because of ambition or blood, but because of wisdom, a trait Slughorn always revered. He was not a leader, not in the traditional sense. He did not crave control, he preferred influence without responsibility, a role that allowed him to guide without commanding. Yet isn't that also the mark of a great teacher? Someone who opens doors, lights lanterns, then lets others find their way. Slughorn was not the architect of change, but the gardener who tended its seeds. In Slughorn's memory of his final meeting with Tom Riddle, he offered a crystallized pineapple as a token, as he always did. That detail reveals something deeply human. Slughorn believed that hospitality, kindness, and the sharing of knowledge were the cornerstones of civilization. His failure came not from malice, but from trust placed in the wrong soul. A Ravenclaw might have done the same, for who, in pursuit of truth, always sees the cost? Somewhere, perhaps deep in the folds of the Sorting Hat's mind, lay the debate it must have had with itself when young Horace sat under its brim. Ravenclaw, it may have whispered, tempted by the boy's sharp mind, his curiosity, his love of rare and arcane things. But then came the memories of lineage, of selectivity, of charm wielded as currency. Slytherin made sense. It always does for those who walk the line between ambition and admiration. Yet in his heart, Slughorn was a scholar, not a schemer, not a zealot, a man who saw value in knowledge for its own sake and who felt most alive when discussing the properties of Ashwinder eggs or the evolution of Amortentia, a man who found joy in letters and potions and wit, a man who, had the Sorting Hat tilted a degree more eastward, might have worn blue and bronze instead of green and silver. He remains a character who defies simplification. His name evokes laughter, his stories warmth. But beneath the joviality lies a question. How many more wizards like him wore the wrong colours, not by mistake, but by the narrowness of a system that values traits in isolation? Horace Slughorn may be remembered as a Slytherin, but his mind, his spirit, perhaps even his soul, was something far more delicate, something brilliant, something distinctly Ravenclaw. Number 24, Lavender Brown. Lavender Brown was not a name that history would etch in marble alongside the likes of Harry Potter or Hermione Granger, yet within the marbled halls of Hogwarts she left footprints that, though often dismissed as frivolous, told the story of a girl who was far more than giggles, perfume and star charts. The Sorting Hat, as ancient and wise as it claimed to be, saw in her the lion's heart of Gryffindor. But had it lingered a moment longer, had it tilted its brim just slightly to the left, perhaps Lavender would have worn the yellow and black of Hufflepuff, and the world would have seen her not as a dramatic side character, but as a gentle force of loyalty and depth. She entered Hogwarts wide-eyed and eager, one of the many first years swept into the ceremony with nervous energy. The Sorting Hat did not hesitate long before placing her in Gryffindor, sensing the courage she might one day find. It was, after all, a house that revered boldness, bravery, and a hint of recklessness. But bravery takes many forms, and not all of them roar like lions. Some whisper in the dark, choosing kindness over conflict, support over spotlight. That quieter bravery lived in Hufflepuff, and Lavender, for all her outward dramatics, carried its essence quietly. As she settled into her Gryffindor identity, she quickly bonded with Parvati Patil, another girl drawn to mysticism, style, and dreams. Together they became inseparable. Classmates knew them as the giggling duo who swooned over divination class and read Witch Weekly under the covers. Their enthusiasm made them easy to mock, especially in a house where the loud, brave, and battle-ready were celebrated. Lavender's affinity for emotions, beauty, and intuition made her stick out in Gryffindor like a candle in a sword fight. And yet she tried to fit in, not by dulling her nature, but by playing up the parts of herself that were easiest to criticize. When she joined divination with Professor Trelawney, something clicked. It wasn't just the incense or the velvet cushions. It was the freedom to feel. In that perfumed haze, Lavender found a place where emotions weren't mocked, but celebrated as windows to deeper truths. Where Hermione Granger rolled her eyes, Lavender leaned in. Her belief wasn't naive, it was sincere. There was a certain kind of magic in feeling things deeply, and Lavender embraced it, even when it left her open to ridicule. Her sensitivity, often confused with shallowness, was actually her strength. She cried more openly than others. She loved with abandon. When Ron Weasley finally noticed her, or seemed to, she threw herself into that relationship with a fervour that only someone unafraid of vulnerability could manage. Their romance was awkward, loud and public, and yes, often ridiculous. But Lavender didn't pretend. She didn't play games. She was, as always, utterly and honestly herself. Her heartbreak, when it came, was raw and visible. Ron had never truly loved her. He'd loved the attention, the validation. Lavender, by contrast, had loved him as she did everything, wholeheartedly. When the relationship fell apart, she didn't lash out or retaliate. Instead, she receded, wounded, but not embittered. Her ability to move forward without spite spoke to a resilience that Gryffindors rarely recognized as courage. Yet it was. The same resilience that could have flourished in Hufflepuff, where emotional honesty wasn't mocked, but valued. When the time came to fight, truly fight, Lavender stepped forward, not as a girl looking to impress, not as a heartbroken ex-girlfriend, but as a member of Dumbledore's army, someone who believed in protecting what mattered. She had trained with Harry, Luna, Neville, and others. She had learned to cast defensive spells to stand her ground. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, her presence in the DA is not central, but it is there, firm and real. She was part of that quiet network of students who practiced in secret, preparing for a future they feared might arrive too soon. And it did. During the Battle of Hogwarts, Lavender didn't flee. She didn't hide behind the walls or weep in a corner. She fought. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, it is noted, 2 bodies fell from the balcony overhead as they reached the ground, and a grey blur that was Fenrir Greyback sank its teeth into one of the fallen. That fallen figure was Lavender Brown. Whether she survived the attack varies by interpretation. In the film, she dies. In the book, her fate is left uncertain. But what matters is that she fought to the bitter end. This was not the same Lavender who squealed over Ron in the Gryffindor common room. This was a young woman who, despite knowing her own fears, chose to face them. She wasn't gifted with the tactical mind of Hermione or the bold leadership of Harry, but she had loyalty. She had heart, traits that belonged to the house of Helga Hufflepuff, who prized those patient Hufflepuffs who toil away, unafraid of hard work and loyal to the end. Had Lavender been sorted into Hufflepuff, her path might have been gentler. There, among peers who understood the strength in tenderness, she would not have had to mask her emotions as comedy. She might have grown into someone like Hannah Abbott, warm, steady, supportive. She and Hannah had similar cores, even if their outer expressions differed. In that environment, Lavender might have become a healer or a teacher, someone whose empathy was an asset, not a punchline. Her relationship with Parvati might have blossomed differently too. While the 2 girls found comfort in each other's company, their experiences were shaped by the expectations of Gryffindor House. In Hufflepuff, their shared love of divination, magical creatures, and kindness would have been celebrated rather than mocked. They might have become the emotional anchors of their cohort, dependable, intuitive, deeply human. Even her fixation on divination, so often dismissed, makes more sense in the context of Hufflepuff, where Ravenclaws demanded logic and Slytherin's results, Hufflepuffs understood the intangible. Lavender didn't care whether the Grim was real, she cared what it represented. She understood that people needed hope, reassurance, a reason to believe. That made her, in a way, a natural emotional healer. It's no surprise that many Hufflepuffs pursued healing careers. Empathy was their calling card, and Lavender had it in abundance. One can only imagine how her role in the DA might have evolved in Hufflepuff. With Ernie Macmillan and Justin Finch-Fletchley, she might have organized support networks, emotional aid, magical first aid. She could have become the heart of Dumbledore's army, reminding the fighters why they fought. For each other, for love, for loyalty. Her voice might not have been the loudest, but it would have been the one that soothed in chaos. Instead, she spent much of her school life trying to fit into a mold that never quite suited her. Gryffindor demanded bravery through action, but Lavender's courage lay in surviving heartbreak, in defending a belief system others mocked, in choosing vulnerability. That kind of courage is rarely awarded house points. It doesn't get you a scar or a headline, but it deserves to be remembered. Even her brief stint as Ron's girlfriend deserves re-evaluation. Lavender didn't seduce Ron or manipulate him. She was simply there, caring, affectionate, attentive. She gave him what he thought he needed, and when it fell apart, she took the hurt with a dignity far greater than she received. In that she showed more maturity than many of her classmates. She was not Hermione, nor did she pretend to be. She was Lavender, flawed, emotional, human. The tragedy of Lavender Brown is that she was never given the space to grow in the way others were. Had she been in Hufflepuff, she might have become a mentor to younger students, a prefect known for her kindness rather than her crushes. She might have left Hogwarts not as a wounded girl on the battlefield, but as a symbol of what it means to care deeply in a world that so often tells us not to. During the final hours of the battle, when spells flew and walls crumbled, Lavender stood beside the very people who once laughed at her. She cast spells with shaking hands. She defended a castle that had given her both joy and sorrow. And when the moment came, she did not run. That, more than any classroom answer or romantic conquest, is her legacy. The Sorting Hat famously said it takes bravery to stand up to your enemies and your friends. Lavender did both. She stood up to the Death Eaters, and she stood firm in her own skin even when her friends didn't understand her. That is a kind of heroism that doesn't make headlines. It dwells quietly, like a candle in a storm, refusing to go out. Perhaps that is why her final moments were marked not by fanfare, but by ambiguity. Rowling never told us if she lived, maybe because her story was never meant to end in death, maybe because Lavender, as always, was meant to remain in the shadows, a reminder that not all courage wears armor. Some wear lavender robes, carry teacups, and cry during lessons. And so, in an alternate world where the Sorting Hat turned its brim the other way, Lavender Brown might have become one of Hufflepuff's shining stars. She would have been the heart of her house, a loyal friend, a fierce defender of the weak, a believer in unseen truths. But even in the scarlet and gold of Gryffindor, she found her own way to shine, quietly, emotionally, completely. Number 25, Dean Thomas. Dean Thomas had always carried the quiet kind of brilliance that went unnoticed beside louder flames. In the great hall, amid the clamour of Gryffindor House, his voice was rarely the first to rise, yet it never trembled when it did. He sketched in margins shaded portraits of Quidditch players during History of Magic, and lingered at the edge of conversations, absorbing rather than interrupting. Dean, unlike Harry or Ron, didn't seek out trouble, nor did he rush toward dragons and cursed artifacts. But if bravery was measured not by noise but by integrity and endurance, then he had enough of it to belong in Gryffindor. Still there were whispers of something else in him, an artist's soul, a careful mind that saw the world in colours and questions. He was a Gryffindor by heart, but there was a Ravenclaw in his spirit. The Sorting Hat had paused on Dean's head, longer than it had on Seamus's, longer than Ron's too. It considered carefully, muttering, as it always did, more to itself than to the child beneath it. Dean, half expecting nothing at all, being raised by a Muggle mother who hadn't prepared him for a talking hat, sat still, wide-eyed, as the hat explored his mind. Artistic, open, curious. "You have the spark of creativity," the hat had noted. "Ravenclaw would suit you. Oh yes, your imagination is rich. You see the world in forms and patterns, not just rules." But then it caught a glimpse of the way Dean had stood up for another boy on the playground once, even before he knew how to use magic. The hat saw the depth of his loyalty, the way he didn't need to shout to make a point, and how he never abandoned a friend in distress. "Gryffindor, then," it said finally, "but you would have done well in Ravenclaw." Years later, that lingering possibility still clung to him. In quiet moments, Dean wondered about it himself. While others dreamed of aura careers or grand duels, he kept a sketchbook under his bed between socks and textbooks, full of charcoal-drawn dragons, sleepy common rooms, and imagined landscapes. During their 5th year, when stress pressed down on everyone like the humid air of a storm, he found peace not in wand practice, but in the way ink flowed on parchment. Luna Lovegood had once passed by and glanced over his shoulder. She didn't say much, just smiled and tilted her head. "That hippogriff's wings look softer than usual," she remarked. Dean didn't know if that was a compliment or critique. With Luna it could have been either, but he remembered it for days. He had always been different from the others, not in a way that separated him, but in a way that placed him just slightly out of sync. Seamus was his best mate, loud and bold, fond of practical jokes and minor explosions. Harry and Ron moved through the world like firecrackers, but Dean was more like watercolour on canvas, subtle, patient, revealing itself slowly. His fascination with Muggle art never faded, even at Hogwarts. He'd once explained to Parvati Patil the technique of pointillism during breakfast, and she blinked at him like he'd spoken gobbledygook. "But Dean," she said, "why would anyone paint with dots?" Professor Flitwick, though not Dean's head of house, once caught him transfiguring a lump of clay into a perfectly symmetrical stone bust. It was just after Christmas break in 4th year, and Dean had taken to practicing late in the evening. "Remarkable control," Flitwick had said. "You think like a sculptor." If the tiny professor had had more authority over sorting, perhaps he would have insisted on Ravenclaw from the beginning. But Ravenclaw House, with its spiralling tower and riddled door, often seemed like the place Dean might have flourished most. In those blue and bronze halls, imagination wasn't just welcomed, it was the cornerstone. The walls themselves seemed to breathe thought, wrapped in centuries of theory, poetry, and design. Padma Patil, who knew more Ravenclaw secrets than she let on, once told Dean that one of the older common room walls changed according to the thoughts of whoever looked at it. "When I'm anxious, it paints storms," she confessed. Dean had been enchanted. "What would it show me?" he asked. "Sketches," she replied. Half finished, always searching. When Dumbledore's army began, Dean didn't join immediately. He wasn't the type to rebel without understanding the consequences, but when he saw what they stood for, truth, resistance, knowledge shared beyond fear, he knew he belonged. He trained hard, not for glory, but because he believed in protecting others. During a late DA meeting, Hermione praised his disarming charm. "Textbook perfect," she said. That meant something. Not everyone earned Hermione's admiration. But while he stood shoulder to shoulder with other Gryffindors, Dean couldn't help but feel that the DA meetings were also artistic in nature. The way Luna swirled her wand with flair, or how Neville planted his feet like a stubborn tree, it was choreography, performance, expression. He once drew a group portrait of the DA members from memory, catching each of them in their signature stance. When Ginny saw it, she asked for a copy. "You made me look fierce," she noted with a grin. "You are fierce," he replied. He wasn't top of the class, but he had an intuitive intelligence, a way of understanding the world that didn't rely on numbers or spells alone. During herbology, while others grumbled about the dullness of soil, Dean imagined how vines curved like ribbon on parchment. Professor Sprout once noticed how gently he handled Flutterby bushes, coaxing their leaves to bloom wider than usual. "You must have a green thumb," she smiled. He shrugged. "I just see how they want to grow." In the aftermath of Dumbledore's death, when the school shifted into darkness and fear, Dean kept his head down. As a Muggle-born, he had no choice. When he went on the run, he did so not in pursuit of adventure, but because survival demanded it. But even then, he found beauty in the cracks of that broken world. Ted Tonks had described Dean's sketches during their time on the run. "You made even that old barn look like a cathedral." In a time when magic seemed corrupted, Dean used pencils and charcoal to reclaim peace. He never wielded magic recklessly. Unlike others, who cast spells for the thrill, Dean preferred enchantments that revealed. He was fond of Lumos, not just for light, but for how it changed shadow. He charmed his sketchbook once to hold colour better than any Muggle marker. A quiet Ravenclaw might have applauded the ingenuity. Even the Ravenclaw ghost, the Grey Lady, might have found his quiet intellect refreshing. She, too, had sought truth in solitude. What separated Dean from the others wasn't lack of courage, it was his rejection of chaos. He didn't run toward fire, he endured it. In the Battle of Hogwarts, he fought fiercely, using shield charms and protective spells to keep others safe. He wasn't in the center of attention like Harry or Neville, but his presence was constant. When the dust settled, he stayed to help gather the wounded. In that moment, he didn't feel like a hero, just a student who refused to give up. Years later, his name didn't appear in many headlines. He didn't join the Auror office. He didn't revolutionize wand-making or challenge ancient curses. Instead, Dean Thomas became a magical illustrator. He was known for painting spell diagrams that moved, literally shimmered on canvas. His Portraits of the Founders exhibit in Diagon Alley became so popular that even Professor McGonagall attended the opening. When she saw his depiction of Godric Gryffindor, she blinked hard behind her spectacles. "You've captured his soul," she said. But it was his Ravenclaw portrait that startled most. Rowena stood tall in blue and bronze, quill poised, her eyes staring forward in contemplation. Around her swirled unfinished thoughts, questions forming in the mist. That painting, according to many, was Dean's most personal work. It said something he never quite put into words. A nod to a road not taken, a tribute to the part of himself the Sorting Hat almost saw. Dean never resented the Sorting Hat's decision. Gryffindor gave him strength, friendships, and a chance to believe in himself. But somewhere in Ravenclaw Tower, a window might have held his favorite view. Somewhere in those riddled corridors, someone might have debated with him about color theory in spellcasting. Somewhere his mind might have soared even earlier. "Sometimes," he told a young student years later, "the hat sees many futures in you, and it's okay to wonder what the other one might have been." The student blinked. "Would you have chosen differently?" Dean smiled. "No," he said, "but I would have loved the paintings on their walls." In a world where bravery often looks like swordplay and sacrifice, Dean Thomas reminded us that it can also look like quiet resilience, a steady wand, and a hand that draws meaning from silence. He never needed to be loud to be legendary, and though his lion's heart led him through war, a raven's wing sometimes stirred in his shadow.